Got to turn the mic on.
Well done, sir.
Well, shit.
If you like what you hear, oh wait, you can't.
If you like what you see, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button so we can change our name from what he just called the Barber Theorem to the Beta Files on YouTube. We've got 26 still. We're holding strong at 26.
They haven't gone anywhere.
Got to get it up. Yeah, that's always a positive sign. I'd rather be flatlined than going down.
Flatline just means death.
Yeah.
Now it's time for Dr. J.
You wanted to revisit a topic we talked about a couple years ago.
A couple years ago?
Back when we were still doing on the phone.
Oh, on the Zoom?
No, the phone.
Oh.
This predates Zoom. Because I was walking around my bedroom upstairs while we were talking about this issue.
Oh, yeah. So which one was it?
It's education.
Oh, yes. Well, we've kind of hit education on and off here and there because you tend to go off about it.
Well, because I get really angry.
Yeah.
Especially when you look at where colleges are going, both 4-year and 2-year schools.
Yeah.
It's not a positive direction.
No, it's not.
We are in serious trouble.
What did I tell that one childhood development teacher this morning? We're heading towards a herding cattle model.
Well, and the other term you could use is customer model. Why did you say herding cattle model?
It's getting them through. Just shoving them through. You know?
Yeah, into the slaughterhouse.
Well, that's the real world, right?
Yeah. That's kind of the problem, is you're not, they go out completely unprepared, and then they wonder why they can't find a job.
Yeah.
It's the biggest lie we tell children, aside from the big man at Christmas lie. That kids, if you get a college education, you'll get a job. That has never been less true than it is right now. It is absolutely untrue. There is no truth in it, and we need to stop telling the lie.
Yeah.
Because it's not working anymore. What you have to say now is, if you go to college and get a master's degree, you are more likely to get a job than if you only get a bachelor's.
Yeah.
That's true.
That's
Tell
academic.
that to them.
That's academic inflation.
Yeah. It's academic inflation, which is a direct result of grade inflation. When you inflate grades, it makes it easier to get the degree. When you make it easier to get the degree becomes watered down. So the private and the public sector can both afford to be more picky.
Yeah.
They have to find a way to separate people out. So the particular sieve they use to separate people out is, what kind of degree do you have? Do you have a master's? Okay, we'll interview you. But even that's not a guarantee.
Yeah.
In 1994, my father is a businessman, told me, he said, if you get a business degree, just get a bachelor's, you'll get a job.
Right.
And in 1994, that was true.
It was true.
That was true. And you could get a really good 6-figure job. You wouldn't start at 6 figures, but you work your way up to that.
Yeah.
With just a bachelor's degree.
Well, okay.
And that changed.
There's also, so this touches on something that I've been talking about with a friend of mine quite a bit.
The friend.
We're going to unveil the friend later.
Yes. Right now, they're just friends.
They're just friend. Good friend of mine. Close friend of mine. But I've been talking about this with a friend of mine for quite a while. My frustration, right? And I'm not ashamed, we can talk. Here's the cool thing about being the state employee. We can talk about our salary unabashedly, because it's public record. You can
That's-
go and find out exactly how much we make because we are state employees. And I make 47 and some change. That's what I make as a English professor at Guilford Tech, right? Now, compared to someone who's teaching secondary education or primary education, I'm making mint, right? But they have 4-year degrees. I've got an advanced degree. I'm making 47. You make more than I do because of the type of advanced degrees that we have.
That's right.
Right?
Which is bullshit.
Which is bullshit. But because the thing is, we're teaching the exact same courses.
Doing the exact same kind of work.
Yeah.
Doing a lot of work outside of the classroom.
Yep.
Let's say we're doing about the same outside work,
Yep. Yep.
including one committee we work on together.
Yeah. Which we're meeting tomorrow. For
I
the
make-
last time this semester.
Mine is 54 a year. All because
So-
of a doctorate.
All because of a doctorate. So, and the thing is I will, in order for me to make that, I would have to go back and get my PhD. It's just that simple. I've made up $4,000. Came in at 43. So I've made up $4,000 in the nearly 10 years that I've been there. This fall will be 10 years since I started working at Guilford Tech. Now that's not full time, but that's when I started the FIT program. When I started the FIT program, it was about 31.
Faculty and training, by the way.
Yeah, faculty and training. It was about 31. And that was high because we weren't supposed to get more than 3 classes, and I ended up with 5. And I wasn't the only one. A really good friend of mine, a truly good friend of mine. I'm not saying that the other friend is not a truly good friend. I'm going to shut up now.
Assholes.
But a guy that can, yeah, assholes. Oh, you dick.
Something you want to tell me?
He's actually working for Clemson now, because he went on to get his PhD after we graduated from grad school together with our masters.
Right.
He went through the FIT program too. We actually went to grad school together and then went through the FIT program together. And he was making the same as me, about 31. And we were the only 2 in the entire FIT program that ended up with 5 classes. We were only supposed to have 3. So we were, she really liked us. She really liked our style. Mac really liked us, liked our style. And so that's how we ended up with the extra classes. We weren't special. It's just, we got lucky, right? I bring that up because even with you at 54, me at 47, there are, and this is what pissed Joe, our former, I almost said her name, our former boss off really bad. They pulled us in to tell us about that logistics program they were going to do. Remember this?
I do.
So they created a new program, Guilford Tech, for logistics. So you can get a job with a 2-year degree, 2-year associates. Mine's a 6-year degree, yours is 8?
What, for a doctorate?
Yeah, it's supposed to be
It took
8.
a long time for me because
Maybe
I had
10?
kids. Yeah.
Well, I mean, no, I'm just talking about the actual program. Isn't it like 8 or 10?
For the doctorate, it's 5. That's how long they'll fund you.
No, okay, so you take the,
You add it with the masters and the masters and the bachelors.
yeah,
It's 7 plus 12 years.
12 years. 12-year, you've got a 12-year degree, I've got a 6-year degree. Okay,
Yeah.
makes sense. 2-year degree. They're going to start, these kids were going to be starting out of that 2-year degree at like 65 or 70, depending on which company they went to. Starting
Yeah.
65 to 70. And they're telling us we're going to teach them. And of course, what was funny was during that whole meeting, our boss raised her hand and asked the guy who was giving the information out, where do we sign up? But it's interesting, and this is what coming back to what me and my friend have been talking about off and on. Education, economically, has taken a huge hit
Yes.
as far as monetary value in our culture. It's still culturally valuable. We're still,
Of course.
when you're still given, I don't want to say kudos, but you still get recognition
Yeah.
when you're a teacher culturally, but you're not making anything. And that's what I've told that person a couple of times, because they have complimented both me and you for what we do as a living. You know, you're doing good work, and it's like, yeah, but good work doesn't pay.
I think
put food on the table.
the term that is often used, and it does make you feel good until you realize that you're still poor, is when you hear the term noble profession.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a noble profession.
It is. It just doesn't pay.
It doesn't pay, and that's how you know it's a noble profession, because we keep doing it anyway.
Because you've got people who, well, and there was an instance where I heard about a guy who was going to, you know, this one company was thinking about creating a new position for him.
Yeah.
Because they were going to branch out into this new area. This guy had never gone to college, had been working in similar type of industry for, you know, I don't know how long he'd been in that industry, but regardless, they were going to start him again around the 60, 65 mark. And it does give me pause. It makes me stop and look at, okay, where did I go wrong? As far as choosing this, because when I went into grad school, the idea was, okay, I'll go into grad school and I'll become a professor because A, it's really fun. It's one of the best gigs in the world.
It is.
2, I had been through manufacturing for 13 years. This was going to be less demanding physically. It's going to be more mentally taxing. It's going to be less physically taxing. And that appealed to me. And 3, the money was supposed to be really good to be a professor. That's what, going back to what we were talking about growing up, you're always taught, if you want to make some good money, professors make good money, right?
University professors.
Yeah.
4-year school professors.
So that's the first question. Where did I go wrong? And then the second question is, where has our culture gone wrong? Because it's not just teachers. Firefighters are a noble profession. They don't make the money they should make.
First responders in general.
EMS.
Yeah.
Right? Now nurses make a killing.
They do, but there's a reason for it, okay? And the reason why they make a killing and firefighters and police officers and EMS don't is because, well, especially true with nurses and then firefighters and police officers, is one is working in the private sector.
Yeah.
And that's the nurse, right?
Yeah.
And so they're going to see a lot more money because it is so lucrative.
It's true.
We work for the state.
Yeah.
I don't know who first responders work for. I'm assuming they work for the county or the city.
Yeah.
They're not going to see the kind of money that they deserve.
Yeah.
And they're supposed to just take it on the chin.
Because they're doing a noble profession.
They're doing a noble profession. But that only goes so far. And people like saying it, but they say it in lieu of making sure they get a better salary, because no one wants them to get a better salary. Because if they're willing to do it at that salary, why should we pay them more?
Why should we increase it? You're absolutely right.
And that's disturbing. And it should
is.
bother anybody. But
yeah, so the COVID thing, right? Especially when COVID got going. And you probably remember this, back last spring, last summer. Nights where people would open up their windows and cheer every night at the same time, cheer the first responders and the nurses and the doctors and all that, right? And we'll talk about doctors here in a minute, because I don't think we realize the situation that doctors are in right now. There's a friend of mine who used to be, well, he still is, he's an anesthesiologist through Cone. We were talking about it one day. And these guys are coming out of med school with $200,000, sometimes $300,000 in student loans. They're still driving Camrys.
of course they are.
The same Camrys they went to med school in. These aren't like the old school doctors where they're coming in with beamers, right? Because they've got so much debt that they've got to pay off. And the pressure on the doctors now is to get into a stable practice that has a network so they can pick up extra money to pay those fucking student loans because they can't afford the student loans. It's too much. And then the hospitals themselves, what's another trend that's happening, talking about the nurses, they're forcing these nurses that have come in that a 2-year degree in nursing used to be good enough. They're forcing them to go back to get the 4-year.
Yes.
So there's more student debt.
Yes.
We can go into student debt if you want to, because it's crippling.
It's the next bubble.
It is.
Because how many students, when they get out and can't find jobs, are going to have to default on their loans?
Yeah, exactly. So, it's going back to my original point, it's frustrating because when you look at different sectors, not all sectors of the economy, but different sectors in the economy where you can make an ungodly amount of money with zero education. But then you're told, as you mentioned at the beginning of all this, we've been told, especially our generation, in order to get good money, you got to go to college. And I've been into that.
Where's the money?
Yeah. And
Well, and most of us do. I mean, we're not paid our worth.
yeah.
And I'm not asking to make a killing, but I shouldn't have to worry about where the money's going to come from in the summer.
Yeah. You mentioned six-figure salary. Neither one of us will ever have a six-figure salary. It'll never happen. I doubt I personally will ever get past 60.
I would be surprised if I get past 60.
You will. Cost of living will notch you up. By the time we get to retirement, you'll be over 60. I don't see that happening to me.
You'll be in the 50s.
Yeah. And I'm not saying 47 is a bad salary. Life circumstances have made 47. I'm 44 years old. At this point, I should be making past 47. I should be in the 50s.
Well, and it gets pretty rough too for those who are a single income household.
Mm-hmm.
And you're trying to live on 47 with a wife and kid.
Yeah.
Or a husband and a child.
Yeah.
And you're the only income.
And that my friend actually mentioned this, and they were right. They were completely right. We live in a culture now where it is impossible, unless you're making like an ungodly amount of money by yourself, it's impossible to have a single income home. Our culture has been constructed in a way where you have to have dual incomes.
Well, and that has all sorts of effects that are really awful.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the kids have no stay-at-home parent to raise them, which is proven to be important.
Yep.
Be it a mother or a father.
Yep.
They're missing that connection because they're going off to preschool and daycare at such a young age. Not that daycare workers don't do a great job, but they're not mom or dad.
No, they're not.
I mean, parents aren't seeing their kids nearly enough, and it's because we've made it so hard to live on one income.
Yeah.
And that used to not be the case.
Yeah.
Now, granted, it had a lot of problems because if you were going to be a stay-at-home parent, then you were going to be a woman.
Yeah.
But now we've got men who would like to do that.
Yeah. Mr. Moms.
You know, I mean, I don't know. I mean, my concern about the student loan issue is it going to eventually look like 2008 did?
Yeah.
And I think we're so far into it that there's no way of getting out now.
No.
It's just going to happen.
Well, I think that's why Bernie and Elizabeth and so many other politicians are really starting to pressure the rest of Congress to take this seriously. Because if they don't get a handle on it now, it's going to ruin the economy. I mean, it's already done damage. And I explain this to my students because one of the topics that my 112s get to choose from for their final paper is the cause and effect of free college, right? Getting rid of student loans.
Yep.
Just giving college to everybody, giving everyone the opportunity. And
Who's earned it? Yeah.
yeah, one of the positives is that you strike that debt. That debt doesn't mean anything anymore. And the reason why it's a huge positive is because, and this is how I broke it down for them, and you're from an economics school, so you could probably explain it with better numbers. But just standing from an outside perspective and looking at it, they're coming out of college and they're increasing their income, but they're not increasing their buying power at all.
Well,
in fact, in some cases, their buying power decreases a little bit.
It means, so we call it disposable income.
Yes.
So after you've paid everything you have to pay, if you're in the situation they're in, you have very little money to put into the market.
Yeah.
So you're not feeding the market, which affects the gross domestic product.
Yeah.
It means that the economy suffers because we are producing a whole host of people who are too busy worrying about paying rent. God, if they're lucky enough to get a mortgage,
Yeah.
get a house, they're paying that plus the bills, plus the student loan debt, and they have enough to go to the grocery store, but they don't have enough to take trips, which adds to the economy. Particularly when those trips are you know, in this country, they can't afford luxury items, and that sounds silly, but it does have an impact on the economy because they just don't have the money to do these other things that we really want people to do to help feed the economy. And I don't have the answer to that, except maybe what do your students end up saying?
Well, they're doing a cause and effect, so they have to give me positive and negatives. So the negative of that, and this is a flip side that we don't talk about, you take away student loans, you're going to kill millions of jobs, hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people who work in the loan industry.
Well, I would say thousands of people.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's true.
And the hole that's going to leave in the economy.
Yeah.
So you're trading one for the other.
But do the math, and I don't know the numbers. When you weigh the number of people who work in the student loan industry, it's
well, it's not just that; it's the interest.
yeah. And I'm not making the argument that we should fire these people.
No.
But if you had to weigh them,
Yeah.
those people who are negatively impacted by free college versus those people affected by student loans.
Yeah.
I think there are undoubtedly more people who are negatively affected by student loan debt than there would be people who work in the
Because you're
industry.
not just talking about the loans that came this year.
No.
At least you can go back 30 years.
Yeah. So, which would you rather? Which sector would you rather hurt?
Yeah.
You have to make a choice, and it's unfortunate. But if it's just pure numbers you're talking about, you're better off either. Okay, so a couple things. Maybe not make it free.
Yeah.
Because there are other issues with making it free.
Yeah.
For example, especially in the 2-year school, it actually has less of an impact on the 4-year school.
Yeah.
How are you going to pay your faculty and staff? Because in the 2-year system, a lot of that money from tuition helps to cover salary.
Mm-hmm. Some of it.
Some of it. 4-year schools, especially the big ones, the faculty aren't getting paid out of tuition.
Yeah.
The really big schools, they're being paid out of endowments. They're simply drawing off the interest from that endowment every year and paying certain professors. So, for example, if you look at Yale, all of the Sterling, they're called Sterling professors, and Harold Bloom was a Sterling professor. All that money is drawn from an endowment. So if Yale wanted to get rid of tuition entirely, it wouldn't affect the faculty. They would still be paid the same they're getting paid right now. 2-year schools is not the same thing. So there's something to be said from a negative side. There's something to be said for free tuition at a community college actually hurting a lot of people,
Well, and
just practically speaking.
right. Well, and I think the original plan, because Obama was the one that broached this.
He did.
I think the original plan was federal dollars covering the free community. Whatever we were going to be short, the Fed was going to pick up the bill to make community college free.
Right.
The problem that they're not addressing is the decrease in value that the high school diploma has seen over the past 30 years.
Yeah.
It is completely dropped out. They don't care about, because the GED can cover anybody who doesn't have a high school diploma. So there's like a fail-safe mechanism, right?
Yeah.
Because of that, anybody can get a high school diploma, done. We're done. And so the high school diploma loses, and this goes back to academic inflation, it has completely and utterly lost all value in our culture. McDonald's doesn't even require it anymore. And I remember when I was in high school, if you wanted to be in management at McDonald's, you had to have a high school diploma. Now it's merit-based. You gotta work your way up. How fucked up is that? That we've lost that one simple requirement.
I remember when high school degrees meant everything, and that was
High
in
school
my
diploma,
lifetime.
yeah.
That was my lifetime. Your
Yeah.
lifetime. And then
It was unbelievably important that you finish high school.
then the degree inflation happened.
Yeah, and now high school, and what we're not doing is and we could get into free community college all day long, but you can't really address that problem or that situation until you fix the high school diploma. You've got to make it valuable again in the market. Once you do that, all this degree inflation starts to come back down. And it trickles, literally trickles up.
Yes.
The university system, well, okay, I'm gonna put it this way. The North Carolina university system was smart in the early 2000s when they eliminated so many of the PhD programs. They saw it coming.
The degree inflation.
Yeah. They saw that there was going to be too many PhDs in the market, and it was going to increase the value of the PhD and decrease the value of everything else, because the PhDs were going to start going for lower order jobs, because the higher order jobs are gone.
The market's
full.
The market's flooded.
Yeah. So what the UNC system did was they relegated specific PhDs to specific schools, and that was it. And so you had to go to a specific school for that PhD, and now it's down to Greensboro and Chapel Hill, and that's it. You can't get a PhD anywhere else in this state except for Greensboro and Chapel Hill.
What about NC State?
And state.
NC State, yeah.
But state has specifically designed PhDs.
Yes.
So it was smart on their part to make that move.
They saw it coming.
They saw it coming.
I was reading, and you're talking about promise of a job. I was reading, this was in 2010 or 11 when I read this article in MLA.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's called The Profession. It's a great journal if you've never read it. It's worth your time because it talks about the issues we're talking about now. It said that at that time, half of all PhDs would never get a tenure track position.
Mm-hmm.
Over half.
Yeah.
And the promise is what? You get this degree, you can get a tenure track job.
Well,
with
and
a capital can.
Do you remember, I think it was PMLA put out a series of journals talking about just focusing on English, talking about the flood of lit degrees versus the comp degrees. And comp was like on the rise as far as demand.
And that was going down.
And lit was going way down because it was, by that point, it's death of, theory had died. The universities were starting to step away from it. And they were starting to focus more on the comp departments because, and this goes back to the 70s with that Newsweek article that kind of shook everybody to the core. The Why Johnny Can't Write. Remember?
I do.
And it shook everybody up, and all of a sudden you started to see more attention on comp. That's how Peter Elbow basically made a career for himself, because he shifted gears into that idea. But you see in the late 90s and early 2000s, by that point, there's all these lit majors in the market, both at the bachelor, not both, but at all three levels, the bachelor's, the master's, and the PhDs, to the point where departments are going to major private companies and pitching these degrees to them and saying they don't have to just teach lit, they can do other things. And I remember this because when I went to App, we had a specific day for transfer students for orientation, and they pulled the English people together, and there was like 10 or 11 of us in this room. They had a dude from IBM come in and say, you don't have to just teach, you can actually come work for IBM. We're hiring you guys because we've been told you can analyze shit. And you can do things that we're not getting out of the STEM degrees.
I told you, I don't know if I've told them, but I've told you this story. My dad had a good friend who shall remain nameless, who worked for SAS. And if you don't know what SAS is one of the biggest tech companies in the world. And we were drinking one night, and I met him, and he said, I would like a copy of your CV, your resume. I said, why? He said, I have a doctorate in British literature. He said, that's why.
Yeah.
Because you don't think like anybody else.
Right.
You think very differently. So if we see a shift, I think we have to tell, because no one told me this when I was in grad school. No one ever mentioned this to me. That, by the way, you can do lots of other things.
Yeah.
Because the only tracks they saw for us were community college and university. No one ever talked about jobs in the private sector.
Yeah. Well, because they want to keep the. What did Ken Robinson say? The university, everything is built to produce like the entire education system is built to produce a university professor. That's what it's built to do. It's not built to do anything else. It is built specifically to make university professors. And when you have a system that does that, you're going to crank out a ton of university professors. And so we're taught that the only thing you can do is teach, because you were built to teach. You're built to run education. It's not the only thing we can do. This morning I had a really cool conversation with a friend of mine. Stop it. About business and the possibilities of what could happen with this one specific transaction, right? And while we were talking, I was laying out all these different scenarios that they were not thinking about. Mm-hmm. And if you were to sit me down and, well, I'm sitting down, that's stupid. If you want to get to the core of it, it's because I was trained in grad school to think that way, to think about those different avenues.
Sure.
We actually had a different conversation about mindsets, that you have really two different kinds of mindsets. Well, you have several, but the two dominant ones are, one mindset is in a straight line. You think in a straight line. You know where point B is, you're at point A, you know how you're going to get to point B. And the other is the type of mindset you and I have, which is more abstract.
Yes.
We don't see point A and point B, we see everything.
That's right.
And so we're looking at everything simultaneously. And so
we're the ones who realizes there's a Z.
There's a Z. Somewhere out there, we see it.
Yeah.
In some cases, that's good. In some cases, it's bad, because there are times when we have to think in A, B situations, and we can't. We struggle with it.
That's why we need people who do that, though.
And we need those people to get us on that track.
And they need
that's
us.
The balance, right? And they need us, because sometimes point A to point B is not the only option.
Well, it's critical thinking.
Yeah.
And it's the ability to interpret data. Mm-hmm. And if you can interpret...
And we're taught to do that.
Yeah, we are. And the importance of hiring people who can interpret data, that's significant.
And that's why I bitched. When I got out of school and I realized what my education actually was, the one problem I had was the math that they made me take. They didn't make me take stats. They made me take trig.
They made you take trig?
Yeah,
Why did they make you take trig?
because you're talking 1997.
Yeah.
You're talking those pathways at that point. Now they have since corrected that, and there are now options to take stats in what we've done, right?
Or logic.
Or logic. But I should have taken stats. That math would have been more productive to what I ended up doing than trig. How many times have I sat down? You've known me for what? We decided 8 years yesterday or the other day? You've known me for 8 years. How many times have you seen me get a piece of paper and a pencil out and find the sign in something? I mean, seriously.
Yeah.
Right? I can't even remember that shit.
No. It's gone. You don't use it, it's gone.
It's gone. I forced myself to keep using Spanish, but I've lost probably a good 80% of the Spanish I learned. And I took 6 years of that shit. And I promise you about 80% of it's gone. Just gone.
If you don't use it, you lose it.
Yeah. So what does that have to do with education? I don't know.
No, it has to do with what happens afterwards.
Yeah, it goes back to that. So that's the only problem I have with any of my degrees is that they made me take the wrong math. They weren't thinking productively.
And you as a baseball fan, of all people,
I know.
should have taken a stats class. You'd have had a great time.
It wasn't on the pathway.
I know.
Trig was.
The pathways are wrong because you take trig for one purpose only, and that's to prep you for calculus.
Yep.
That's the whole point of trig.
That's it. And calculus preps you for physics.
That's right. Or economics.
Yeah.
Or the social sciences where they use calculus.
Yeah.
It doesn't really prep you for your course in Chaucer.
But the thing is, you and I use stats all the time.
We do. We do. To be fair, I think everyone should have stats at some point in their career.
Yeah.
At the very least, so that at the very least, they're not fooled by media's use of stats.
Yeah.
Because media uses stats, they use stats kind of fast and loose.
Yeah.
And they sound like something until you actually learn how stats work. And it's like, how did you arrive at that number?
Yeah.
Where did you get that from? That doesn't sound right to me.
Yeah.
Something's amiss.
Well, and I tell my students this in 112 when we talk about rhetoric and shit, right? Pay attention to the graph. Pay really close attention to the graph. Don't listen to what they're saying. Mute it.
Yep.
Read the graph, because the graph they will take and make, like the example I always give them, like they'll poll 5 people. It's 5. And they'll say, 3 and 5 say this. And they'll throw up a graph. They won't show those numbers. They'll show the red line.
They also don't show, well, they do, okay, so they do show this, but no one pays attention to it.
Yeah.
The plus or minus at the bottom. They never talk about the plus or minus.
Nope.
Ever. And the plus or minus tells you how valid the statistic is.
Yeah.
Because if the plus or minus is greater than the number on the graph, the statistic is meaningless.
Yeah.
And we don't know that. I learned that in stats.
Well, and the other thing, going back to the example I was giving, what you got to understand it, the lower the number of the pool, the less they're likely to show numbers on that graph. They'll show lines. And so your brain takes that line as meaning something that it's not. And then that red line goes through it. And depending on the thickness of that line, again, it goes back to rhetoric, is how important they want you to take that information. So if they got a really thick line on there, oh, it's bad. It's a really thin line, they don't want you to really pay attention to it. It's all rhetoric. How do I know this? Fucking lit.
Yeah.
So that's why I get pissed off when people say it's not important to take a lit class. Bullshit.
The hell you say. Yeah, I agree. Because I get this every semester from my lit students. I don't know why should I take this? It's not going to matter in my career.
Mm-hmm.
And I always ask them the same thing: is the career you want to do going to require any kind of thought whatsoever? Yeah, okay. So it does.
Yeah.
You're going to have to interpret data in your career. Really? Okay. Yeah. So what do you think you're doing here? I'm giving you a text and asking you to make sense of it. How is that not useful?
Yeah.
Outside of college,
Right.
tell me how that's not useful. To look at something and not take it at face value, which is what most people do. They see something, they simply believe it, and they move on to the next thing. Someone who does this for a living is suspicious of the data and says, how did they arrive at this?
Yeah.
So one of the things I did with my critical thinking students my first semester, when I didn't know what I was doing, because I was just learning, is I would take this book we use called The Art of Thinking.
Yeah.
And rather than getting them to answer the questions, I would get them to find problems with the questions.
Right.
So they would spend the entire semester looking at these problems at the end of the chapter and eventually they would say, this is an invalid question. This question is stupid because they didn't do this, this, or this. And I'm like, and rather than answer the question, ask questions about the question.
Yeah.
And when you get there, you're ready.
Yeah.
But until you're there, if your first thought is to answer the question without looking at the question and evaluating the question, you're not there yet because you just trust what you see. Why would you trust what you see? In the business world, they don't trust what they see. They ask questions about what they see.
Yeah.
How did you arrive at this information?
Well, and that's kind of we talked about my Santa Claus lesson
Yes.
in critical thinking.
Yes.
Where I'd put up Santa Claus, Mormonism, Scientology, and Christianity. And we would go through each one and discuss the actual tale, right? And then ask them at the end, which one is the most believable when you look at all four side by side by side?
And every time they say
Every
the same
time
thing.
it's Santa Claus.
Yeah.
Santa Claus is the most believable one of the four, right? And the purpose of that lesson, what we get to at the very end of that lecture is stop and really look at what you're looking at. Don't just take for granted. I do this with posters. And I always, because you know how we've got those damn posters on our walls,
Yes.
right? In the classrooms. That one with the kid, the black kid with the polo and the pants. And beside it says, get respect by giving respect. And respect is bold and larger font in both instances. And I tell them, really read that poster. What is that poster really saying? It's telling the minorities on this campus, respect the white people. That's exactly what that poster's saying. Get respect by giving respect. It's right there in front of your face. It is one of the most racist posters you've ever seen in your life, and nobody pays attention to it because they don't know how to read the goddamn poster.
They don't. Because
And it is super racist.
because they can't see the text as a text.
Yeah. They
Yeah.
just pass by that poster and see some kid in a polo and pants, and oh, okay, I've got to dress nicer. That's not what that fucking poster is saying. There's the other one with the old people sitting around a table in the library about the tobacco policy. And I tell them, what's that really saying? Stop smoking. You too can be in your 60s and 70s and go to Guilford Tech. That's exactly what that poster's saying. Because it's old people. These people are in their 60s.
Yeah. And you only arrive at that with a knowledge of interpretation.
Yeah, you got to really pay attention. And so that's going back to the Santa Claus thing and what you do with the questions thing. What we're doing, and we were taught this in lit class. We were taught this with Shakespeare. They taught us how to do this with fucking Shakespeare.
Of course.
And Hemingway.
Yeah.
Because those guys knew what they were doing.
Yep.
Red herrings everywhere.
Well, and it teaches you another skill that we've kind of lost, and that's how to write.
Yeah.
And when I talk to mine about it, I tell them, I'm like, you know, we don't write after we're done thinking.
You got a lighter?
Yeah, we write in order to think.
Right.
Writing helps you think, especially the brainstorming phase.
Mm-hmm. Outlining.
We write to think. I've arrived at some pretty crazy ideas by putting pen to paper without knowing what I'm doing yet. I would say half of my good ideas on the scholarly level, and even the writing the poetry, I mean, I don't know where the poem is going until the writing dictates to my mind where I should go. So they're not thinking, they're being taught in school how to think in one way only.
Yeah.
And what they're taught is rote memorization and regurgitation. They're not at a young age getting synthesis. They're not getting interpretation, and they're not developing, and I don't know who came up with this term, and it's one that I love, and I tell my students, the hermeneutic of suspicion. And that means doubting everything that you see, asking questions about what you see, saying, does this even make sense? What is this trying to do to me? What impact is this trying to have on me? And they're not learning.
Small penis alert.
Yeah, small penis alert. They're not learning anything about how to live in the world. And you know what? If my entire education had been rote memorization and regurgitation, I'd be pissed off too.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you don't need that skill, because you do. But if that's where you stop, then you've stopped at the water's edge. And that's a problem.
I have bitched about multiple choice for years. Multiple choice does not belong in higher education.
No.
Yes, use it in primary and primary school and secondary school to an extent, but it does not belong in higher education. And the way because my students have always bitched, complained, because my quizzes were always answers. You had to give an answer. You couldn't, there was no list to pull from. My exams, right? Who wrote me? That one section, who wrote me, right? I give them the character, they have to tell me the author who wrote them. I don't have a bank. I don't have a bunch of authors' name over to the side. They have to remember this shit. But the example I always give is the multiple choice question versus the short answer question. The multiple choice question is, Abe Lincoln was the blank president of the United States. And then A, 16th, B, 29th, C, 100th, D, George Washington, right? I'm like, okay, so what's the answer? And they're always like, 16th. I'm like, exactly. What'd you learn from that? Nothing.
Nothing.
You learned absolutely jack shit from answering that question. But if you have a short answer question that says, the Gettysburg Address was 2.5 minutes long. Why are we still talking about the Gettysburg Address now? Then you have to know the Gettysburg Address. You have to know his administration. You have to know about the Civil War. You have to know a lot of stuff to answer that one quick question. You can't just say, because it's cool. You have to actually answer the question. You gotta have a bank of knowledge. And what did you do? You actually learned how to take all that information, synthesize it, and put it together in an answer.
Yes.
And guess what? That's what we fucking do in the real world.
Yes.
You take multiple different things, you put them together to solve a problem.
I don't know of a single job that says, all right, today employees, we're going to be taking a multiple choice test in order to figure out what the profit loss margin is and why. Why Johnny ran over his foot on third shift last night. I mean, I've never...
Was he A, drunk, B, high, C, asleep, or D, none
all
of the above? All of the above.
It's always D.
It's always D. They told us that too when we were prepping for the CAT. You remember the CATs?
Yes.
They always told us, if you see none of the above as one of the options, or all of the above as one of the options, you fucking mark that, because that's the answer.
It's fucking California achievement test.
I know.
It's so
I miss that shit.
stupid.
I used to keep a running total. This is so funny. When I was in 4th and 5th grade and 6th grade, we took it in 6th grade too. I used to keep a running total of how many A's, B's, C's, and D's I marked to see who would win. I made it a game. That was the only way I got through that fucking test.
I've so badly wanted over the years to create a true-false test in which every single question was true. Just to get those little bastards to say, there's no way.
There's no way.
All of these can't be true.
What was it? The one thing I did one year was in the ADA statement. I went in there and buried a sentence in there. If you find this sentence, email me immediately. I'll give you an A for the semester right now. Not a damn email. Not a single one, because they don't read that shit.
No.
And I showed it to them after they turned everything in. I was like, by the way, let's look at the syllabus. And I pulled it straight down to the ADA statement. I said, and I highlighted the sentence of that. How many of you saw that? I said, none of you. I know, because I didn't get a single fucking email.
Would you have actually given them an A for
I
the
would have
semester?
done it. I would have done it.
They don't read.
They don't read.
They don't read. So where
But I
does
did
this
to prove a point.
So where does this take us, man? I mean,
I don't think we actually got to talk about the problems of education. We just bitched.
but I think we. Well, I think we have. Though. I think we're doing it all wrong.
Yeah, we're doing it all
And
wrong.
then the where this takes us is, and I'm not speaking about any particular college or university because I think it's across the board, is that we talk about success rates.
Mhm.
And that sounds fine if you're not an educator. You're like, well, we
Yeah.
should talk about success
Yeah.
rates, and that matters. And I'm glad we're having that conversation. But when you tell educators your grades need to be higher, and you don't tell them how, and you put pressure on them, they're going to start being a bit more lax about their grades, which means we're sending out kids into the world without the requisite skills to survive.
Yeah. I think what we need to do as a system, not as a culture, but within the education system, we've got to define two words. We've got to sit down and actually define what it is we're talking about. The two words are equity and success.
Yes.
What do those two words really fucking mean in terms of education? Because what I tell my students at the beginning of every semester, I tell them success is not an A. You can have a C in this class and be successful. Success is when you take what I've taught you and you apply it outside. That's when success comes. And you can be a C student and do that shit.
Yep.
You don't have to have an A to be able to apply what you've learned in my classroom. An A is a misnomer. It just means you did the work a little bit better than everybody else. Good for you. Because when you get into a real world job, they don't give two shits what your grade was in algebra. They don't care.
Nope.
Did you pass the class? Did you get the degree? That's what they care about. If you got the degree, they don't care. They don't care about honors programs. They don't care about Phi Theta Kappa. They don't care about fucking Shaws, any of that shit. They don't give a flying fuck. They don't care if you walk the stage. Did you get the goddamn degree?
Yep.
Yes. Okay, you got the job.
Yep.
We'll figure out what you know and don't know because every industry is different. They're going to have to train you anyway. They don't care about that fucking project you turned in for Miss Smith and you got 100.
Yep.
They don't give two shits about that fucking thing. So chill the fuck out over your grades. Do the best you can and start learning how to apply what you learn in the classroom outside. That's what's important.
But
Because when you get that job, you're going to have to take that shit and you're going to have to apply it outside.
the point I'm making, though, and you're not wrong. I mean, you're right.
Sorry, I went off on a tangent. I just had a Jason tangent.
You did, in fact. You were actually rather angry.
Something's got to give.
There you go. But the bigger problem is that administrations are forcing their faculty to dumb it down.
Yeah.
Which means that congratulations, you got an A, but did you learn anything?
And the answer is no.
Were you stretched at any point? Were you challenged at any point? And the answer is not really no.
We're
So-
seeing that now when they're coming into our classrooms because they're not learning shit.
No, and we're having, and again, I'm very sympathetic to the teachers because they're being told they can't do what they want to do either.
Exactly.
We blame the teachers because it's
It's not
convenient.
their fault.
It's not their fault. You can blame the teachers all day long, but the teachers are handed a lesson plan and told this is what you have to do.
Yeah.
I've got a friend in South Carolina who's a former student of mine and a teacher. And on a number of occasions, he's rather openly challenged the administration, and I'm just waiting for the day they finally fire his ass.
They will.
Because he's not doing, he told me, I lie about the SLOs all the time. Because I want these kids to get a real education. And they do.
That's
they
good.
do. But there is a price to be paid for that kind
Yeah.
of behavior.
Yep.
To be that insubordinate, even if you're right, and he, of course, is right, you pay for it. And I have a feeling we're going to see at 2-year and 4-year schools, we're going to see professors and instructors let go, especially those who don't get a chance to get tenure.
Yeah.
They're going to fire their ass and say,
Yeah.
we can find someone who's going to give them higher grades, which is really what they're asking for.
Yeah. They want higher grades.
Just give them higher grades. Just give them higher grades. They don't have to have earned those. Just let them have it.
That's where we're heading.
I think so. And I
No,
mentioned
it's where we're heading. You can see it everywhere.
and I mentioned it earlier. This was before we started talking. We've moved toward a customer-based model. And the customer in this regard is always right.
Mhm.
That's where we are. That's where we are. It's not good. It's extraordinarily risky. The first time I ever heard an administrator, and I've never heard a faculty member use this word, but referring to students as customers, that was the beginning of the end.
Yeah.
Because now you've reduced education to a business transaction between a salesperson and a customer.
Yeah.
And we're the salespeople. And we're selling them an education. Well, they paid for it, therefore they deserve it.
No.
They deserve a chance, is what they deserve. And we owe them a chance.
We owe them a chance. That's
Yes,
it.
that's it. It is up to them what they do with the opportunities we give them.
Yeah. Well, I tell my students, this is voluntary. You realize that, right? You don't have to be here. That's why I don't care if you skip. It's on you.
Yeah.
Don't email me and ask me for the lesson plan. You're not going to get it. You're going to have to get with one of your classmates, find out from them what they missed. But I don't care if you show up or not. Because it's voluntary. This isn't high school. I can't make you go to class. And if the administration is, because they're talking about somebody, we were talking to somebody this morning, they said that they called their students. As soon as she said that, oh, I cringed. If it wasn't somebody that I respect highly, I would have let her have it, man. Don't fucking call your students. What the fuck is wrong with you? I've never called my students. And the administration keep pushing us to contact our students. No, at one point, are we going to make them responsible for their education?
Not anymore, that's for sure.
Because I was responsible for mine. My teachers didn't give a shit if I skipped.
No. Well, and I think those days they're not over, but we're getting there. I think it's going to be harder and harder to teach in higher ed. It's going to be harder and harder to do it well. And I don't see a way out now, because especially in the 2-year system, faculty just don't have any power to push back. At least in universities, faculty have the Senate and tenure, and they can push back and say, you've gone too far.
Yeah.
And the administration has to say, okay, well, let's come up with something else.
Yeah.
As opposed to the 2-year system, where the administration says, this is what we're doing, and the faculty says, okay, I guess we have to do that now.
Yeah.
Because they don't want to lose their jobs.
Yeah.
Because you don't dare go to an administrator and say no.
We don't have the power to push back.
We don't have the power. That's a part of the problem. And it's unfortunate because, to be quite blunt, we know more than they do.
Yeah. About the students.
About the students. We are with them day in and day out. We know how classes work. We know what they know.
Yeah.
And you try to tell that to someone who hasn't been in a classroom in 20 years, they're at a loss.
Yeah.
Because what you were doing 20 years ago is no longer applicable.
Yeah.
Because the student body has changed markedly.
So has the culture.
So has the culture. Yes, absolutely, and that's why we're in trouble. Is that the administrators who are making these decisions aren't in touch with what's happening on the ground.
I think every administrator that is in a decision-making position should teach one class every semester.
Yeah, or at least a year, for God's sake. At least one
Semester.
a year. I think
Once
a
a
semester is
semester.
ideal. That way they keep seeing it.
Yeah, and they're in touch with the student body more so than they are now because they're cut off from the student body.
And then they can tell me that we need to give higher grades.
Yeah.
If you go through that semester and your success rate is high, then teach me how to teach.
Yeah.
But I have a feeling their success rates are going to be just as low as everybody else's.
Yeah.
Because we're teaching kids who aren't ready.
Yeah.
They were not prepared. I had I had one class, none of the students in the room had ever heard of a homonym before. This was new information.
Yeah.
I said, none of you learned this in school. Nope.
Well, what did we talk about last week? Roman numerals. I swear to God, if I teach Roman numerals one more fucking time.
I know. They're not getting the skills
I'm an English
required.
professor. Why am I teaching Roman numerals?
I know. So I don't know. I mean, you said it already. Something's got to give. Something's got to
gotta give.
change.
Yeah.
I just don't see it happening as long as administrators can make unilateral decisions. I, of course, am not talking about my institution.
So this is appropriate, and this works out well because last week we ended with a letter that I got from a student years ago. I got another one years ago too. A student who went on to Appalachian State, and he wrote me just really quick email. He'd been gone for a couple of semesters. He was getting towards the end of what he was doing at App. He shot me a quick email and said, "I want you to know everything you taught me in 112, I have used multiple times while I've been up here." And he said, "Thank you very much."
Wow.
So every once in a while, we break through, Jason.
Yeah.
Every once in a while. So there's your up note. We're out there fighting. What's my sign say on my door? Saving the world one paragraph at a time.
Yes.
That's what we do. I'm the barber. This is Dr. J. Peace.
Now it's time for Dr. J.